Despite the SEC's new rules, despite what the NCAA wants to say, I still believe that Mark Mitchell will play for Kentucky this season.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of the show, I want to talk about some actual basketball. I'm tired of talking about all this legal jargon. Unfortunately, we do not get the luxury of really doing that today. We will talk ball later in the show, but there's a real problem here in the SEC, and it's not the ruling that you think. But first, I believe that Mark Mitchell will play for Kentucky this season, and I'm going to explain why. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind you guys we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. We are live here on YouTube explaining why I believe that Mark Mitchell will play for Kentucky this season. We can't get to the phone lines live, but if you do want to leave a voicemail for the show, you can do so at 859-359-6362. That is the number to call. Again, leave a voicemail if you call in, and we will get to you. 859-359-6362. We'll try and get to you on tomorrow's episode. Okay, so in case you did not see it, the SEC has dropped some new rules, and they are threatening these universities, effectively, that want to bring back professional athletes. I think this is all more so slanted towards what LSU is trying to do, what Lane Kiffin is trying to do right now, bringing back NFL players to his team, or at least attempting to. But the SEC put out a broad strokes ruling that kind of catches Mark Mitchell, in an interesting spot. And after the last 24 hours, after mulling it over, doing some research, here's my prediction. Mark Mitchell will play for Kentucky this season. I'm not saying that he is cleared, right? I'm not saying that this thing is over. And I'm definitely not saying that everybody can just fire their attorneys and go home. That's not what I'm saying. But if you made me bet today, I'm taking Mark Mitchell to be in Kentucky's lineup on November 3rd. I'd put it somewhere, if I had to guess, around 65 to 70% confidence, 30 to 35% no. And weirdly enough, in my opinion, the SEC's brand new professional player rule that they just implemented actually made me more confident once we got the facts straight. So let's go through the SEC's new rule and the three little rules within it one by one. The SEC says a school cannot roster an athlete who previously declared for the NBA, NFL, WNBA draft and did not appropriately withdraw. 2, signed a professional contract. And 3, was listed on an NBA/G League/NFL/WNBA roster. They put this all out in a little graphic yesterday. And when that dropped, it looked really bad for Mark Mitchell. Twitter was ablaze. Everybody was freaking out. I was saying, well, there's no way, there's no pushback on this. And then you actually start to dig a little bit. We start to actually think about, well, what is Mitchell's case here? 2 of those 3 provisions actually look much less applicable, in my opinion, than they originally appeared. So the first rule that we're sitting here talking about, did Mark Mitchell actually declare for the NBA draft, right? That's the first rule. Previously declared for the NBA, NFL, WNBA draft and did not appropriately withdraw. This is the most important clarification that I don't think a lot of people on social media really understood initially. Mitchell was not an NBA early entry candidate. He was a fourth-year college player whose eligibility, under the rules being applied at the time, had expired. He was not eligible to be an early entry candidate in the NBA draft. The NBA automatically makes players in that situation draft eligible. We can actually verify this. The NBA's official April 27th release listed all 71 players who filed as early entry candidates for the 2026 NBA draft. Mark Mitchell obviously is not on that list because he didn't need to file for early entry. Therefore, there was no ordinary early entry declaration for Mitchell to subsequently withdraw. That is massive because the SEC's language is, again, I'll read this in my notes, previously declared for the NBA draft and did not appropriately withdraw. So Mark Mitchell's argument here is, well, I didn't formally declare in the first place, right? I was automatically draft eligible because you guys considered my college eligibility exhausted. That's a pretty dang compelling distinction and one that needs to be made. So the second rule, did he actually sign a contract? Did he sign with the Denver Nuggets? According to Mark's brother and agent Brandon Mitchell, no. He did not. He said that there was a verbal understanding regarding what Mitchell could potentially sign, an Exhibit 10 deal, with the possibility of earning a two-way, but Mitchell never signed it. Brandon Mitchell told the Lexington Herald-Leader, quote, he did not sign anything, end quote. Now, there is conflicting information worth acknowledging because Missouri itself published on June 25th a release saying Mitchell had, quote-unquote, signed with Denver and, quote-unquote, inked a deal. So if somebody wants to sit there and say, well, Lance, Twitter user, who have you, everyone reported that he signed. They're right. That's what was reported at the time. But the person representing Mitchell now says that there was no contract ever executed at any point. Ultimately, this is not an argument that should be made on Twitter. Either there is a signed contract or there isn't. If there's no signature, the second rule here in the SEC's little graphic that they put out should be extraordinarily difficult for the SEC to use against him. They just straight up can't. If he didn't sign anything, he didn't sign anything. The third rule is the one that still concerns me, and this is the gray area, in my opinion. Mark Mitchell absolutely played in the NBA Summer League. NBA.com has literally a page titled 2026 Summer League, NBA Summer League roster, Denver Nuggets. Mark Mitchell Jr., number 26, is right there. So the SEC says an athlete cannot have been listed on an NBA/G League roster. We need an answer here. Does that mean an official NBA/G League roster or any roster associated with an NBA team, including Summer League? Because those aren't the same thing. Summer League's not NBA. Like Mitchell's side is arguing here, he was never actually on an NBA or G League roster. That currently is very defensible. The SEC has not publicly clarified the Summer League question, and I don't know if they will. So I would not sit here definitively and tell you, oh, broad strokes, the SEC rule doesn't apply to Mark Mitchell, because we don't know that right now. And instead, it's two of the SEC's three provisions appear not to fit Mitchell at all. The Summer League provision is the one that's unresolved currently, and one that I think is very defensible just based on the SEC's language that they put out in this thing. That is the accurate statement here. And now, in case you didn't see it, his attorney is now firing back. Ryan Downton, who represents Mitchell and other fifth-year plaintiffs, has gone on social media attacking, or I think it was in an interview. It might have been in a social media post attacking new conference rules. He told On3 as well, quote, the SEC's actions put the NCAA in contempt of multiple court orders, end quote. He also called conferences creating new rules after court injunctions, quote, cartel-like conduct, which to each their own on how they want to share their opinions on this, especially the lawyers in the room. Important distinction here, that is Downton's legal position now. A judge has not ruled that the SEC is in contempt, but it does tell you something important, that Mitchell's lawyer is not prepared to roll over, especially if Greg Sankey says no here. So that's part of why I lean yes. Let's sort of put everything together. Got a lot of notes. We got 13 pages of notes on this today. Mitchell currently has a Kentucky court order giving him a temporary fifth-year protection, permission to enroll at Kentucky, permission to participate in team activities, no executed NBA contract according to his agent, no appearance on the NBA's official early entry candidate list, an attorney clearly prepared to challenge additional restrictions. The one unresolved professional issue is, does NBA Summer League count under the SEC's new roster provision? It's a much better position for Mark Mitchell than I thought he was in at about 5 o'clock yesterday. So why am I only at like 65, 70% yes here for Mitchell? There are two serious problems still. First and foremost, the NCAA can continue to challenge Brian Edwards' Kentucky ruling alongside a number of other rulings across the country. We can't just hand wave that away here. The NCAA has already convinced the 10th Circuit to stay in the Colorado injunction, the broad strokes one there that had tried to give all athletes in the 2022 class eligibility. So different courts have shown that they're willing to listen to the NCAA's argument here. Mitchell has his own Kentucky protection, no duh. The Colorado one did not strip him of eligibility, but it does demonstrate that winning at the trial court level does not guarantee for any of these kids that they're going to play in November. The second thing here is the SEC has another rule. This is the actual problem. This is the bigger SEC-specific problem. Forget the Summer League. Forget Exhibit 10 contracts. Forget whether or not Mark Mitchell technically declared for the draft. The SEC's best argument here against Mark Mitchell might be much simpler, actually. It's the fact that he wants to transfer from Missouri to Kentucky. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail here in just a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Kalshi. Before the season even kicks off, everybody and their grandmother is sitting around at the dinner table making predictions. Grandmother and grandfather are asking, well, who wins the division? They're debating on that. They're asking who wins the playoffs, who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at the season's end. And they can sit there and they can argue all they want. You can take all the information in about what they believe about rosters or offensive line play or different things like that. But on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can actually trade those predictions and opinions and thoughts in a live market. So maybe you want to go and say, well, I believe this NFL team is going to make the playoffs. That maybe has not historically been a team that often makes the postseason. Maybe you want to go say, well, Kentucky football this season under Will Stein, I think they're going to make a bowl. You could go over to Kalshi and you could trade against peers in a live market. There's no house on Kalshi. As the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. You can trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Got to get some water in because this is obviously all the podcasts are me yapping for an insane amount of time. But this one's a doozy, as have some of the last few episodes. So there's a bigger problem here than the rule that the SEC tried to throw out yesterday. The real SEC problem here is the intra-conference transfer rule. You guys know what I'm talking about here. After all of this conversation about professional basketball, we're talking about the wrong SEC rule here, in my opinion. Because the new professional athlete policy gets the headlines here. Of course it's going to. But if Greg Sankey really wants to prevent Mark Mitchell from playing for Kentucky, which for Mitchell, for Jalen Washington, for some of these other college basketball players that are in very similar positions wanting to come back to this to college ball in the SEC. For players like Denzel Aberdeen, I have strong words and opinions about what Greg Sankey is trying to do here that I cannot say on this show. But if he really wants to dig in here, if Commish Sankey wants to really dig in here and try and make sure that he screws some of these kids over, the interconference transfer rule is a much cleaner way for Sankey to do that. And you may say, well, what is that rule? Here it is, guys. SEC bylaw 14.5.5.1. That's right. I went and looked it up. It says a player, including a graduate transfer, can be immediately eligible when transferring from one SEC school to another, provided he gives notification of transfer during his sports regular NCAA transfer window immediately following the championship segment. That is the rule. That's not NCAA. That's the SEC saying that. For men's basketball in 2026, that window was April 7th through April 21st. Mark Mitchell entered the portal 5 days ago on August 21st and said he wants to go to Missouri to Kentucky. Under a straightforward reading of the SEC's normal interconference transfer rule, Mark Mitchell missed the window. There's your legitimate hurdle. And the funny thing about this is that Sankey was already out here warning everybody about this. Even before Judge Brian Edwards ruled on Mitchell's specific case, Sankey sent a memo to SEC schools And his language was very, very specific. Quote, SEC eligibility rules, including those relating to intraconference transfers, remain in effect until fully or individually waived or the rule is changed, end quote. That's not somebody that's just accidentally forgetting, oh, Mark Mitchell played at Missouri. The SEC has been thinking about this exact scenario with Aberdeen, with Mitchell, with Washington, with what I assume to be others. And they're actively trying to go out of their way to, again, for lack of a better term in the moment, screw these kids over. So you may say, well, Lance, that seems pretty rough. Why do you still believe that Mark Mitchell will play? Because applying this rule to Mark Mitchell, in my opinion, creates an absurd problem. Let's go back to April 21st. What was Mark Mitchell's NCAA eligibility status? That's right. 0. He had none. It was over. As far as everybody and their mother knew, his college career was over. He had played 4 seasons. The NCAA had not granted his class 5 for 5. The Kentucky court had not ruled. The Colorado case had not created nationwide relief. Mark Mitchell had absolutely no reason to put his name into the transfer portal. None. What was he supposed to do is the question. I'm dead serious. Imagine Mark Mitchell walking into Missouri's compliance office on, let's say, April 15th, right? And he goes, hey, I want to enter the transfer portal. And the compliance office says, what on earth are you talking about? You're done. Go to the NBA, or at least try to. And he could say, well, I don't have any eligibility left, but I'm predicting that 4 months from now, I don't know, multiple courts around the United States of America will suddenly rule against the NCAA, and then I'll sue in Louisville, and Judge Brian Edwards will give me another season, or he might. That's just kind of what I'm predicting 4 months down the line, all that to happen. They would have looked at him and said, you are crazy. Get out of my office. As my notes say, he couldn't plan for a 5th season that did not exist. This is different from normal SEC transfer cases. This is unique. The SEC's intraconference transfer rule makes sense under ordinary circumstances, right? You have eligibility. There's a designated window. Everything's awesome. You want to leave Alabama for Auburn or Missouri or Kentucky or Tennessee or what have you, enter during the window. That's cool. Everybody knows the rules. That's fine. But Mitchell's eligibility itself was restored after the window closed. And the Kentucky court specifically gave these plaintiffs an opportunity to enter the portal. Now the SEC potentially sits here and says, congratulations, you're legally allowed to enter the portal. Unfortunately, you should have entered 4 months ago. What? What? Lawsuit. This is where your next lawsuit comes from. Or could come from, I should say. And this is not me speculating, by the way. CBS reported that Ryan Downton, the lawyer here that represented Mitchell and these other plaintiffs, believes these court orders should permit affected players to transfer within the SEC. Quote from Downton, we believe the order should allow players to transfer within the conference, but have reached out to the SEC to discuss. And here's the really interesting part. CBS reported that multiple SEC schools believe the conference's interconference transfer restriction might not survive a court challenge in this situation. The SEC itself declined to tell CBS whether the rule would hold up under these court orders. And ladies and gentlemen, that matters. You have a potential lawsuit on your hands, SEC. And I understand yesterday that these universities voted in favor of making sure that professional players were not eligible to come back to college. I get that. This is a separate issue. If Mitchell has zero reason to be bothered by what the SEC put out yesterday, neither Mitchell nor the University of Kentucky can look at this and say, alongside other SEC schools who are going to push back on this that also voted against the professional stuff, but as well, mind you, this is not a Kentucky specific instance. There was somebody on Twitter yesterday trying to tell me this is how Texas Tech and Sorsby went down, and he's not going to play because Kentucky's not going to fight this. Really? Really? CBS Sports now reporting that multiple SEC schools are saying, yeah, this is probably not going to survive a court case. And multiple other SEC schools have also received a 5th-year player that is in the exact same position that Mark Mitchell is in. You're telling me that multiple other SEC schools aren't also going to push back on this? Just because they agreed to another rule, just because you agree to one rule, doesn't mean you agree to them all. It also does not set precedent that the SEC can't control anything and that everything is now in question. No, it's a case-by-case basis. Everything is specific here. Every single part of this is separate, especially if Mitchell has no reason to care about what the SEC put out yesterday. What should the SEC do, though? You may be asking. What should they do? They should do what the NCAA should have done 5 months ago. Give a one-time waiver. And they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. They're going to fight this until they are beaten to the ground over this loss. They will lose in court. They will do this until they lose in court, just like the NCAA is doing. But they should just give a one-time waiver. Not everybody, not forever, not abolish the conference rule. I'm not asking for anarchy and just saying you could do whatever you want. Let's bring Jack Pyburn back. Let's bring Whit Weeks or whoever back. LSU. You have to sit here and say, that's what I wrote down in my notes. Players whose eligibility was restored by a court after their sports normal portal window may transfer within the SEC during the court-created window. That is so simple to do. It's not hard. That's the rational answer. Because otherwise, you are punishing Mark Mitchell for following the rules. Mitchell did not hide eligibility. He did not intentionally wait until August to chase more money. He did not skip an available portal window, knowingly circumvent the SEC's rule. He did not have eligibility to transfer. He did not have any. The NCAA's position here was, you're done, get out. Then a judge came in and said, no, you're not. And the SEC's response cannot reasonably be, okay, but you should have transferred while you were still done. That does not make sense. You should have transferred while you were out of eligibility and couldn't. That does not make sense. It's why I think another court could be sympathetic. Because, again, I'm not guaranteeing Mitchell will win another lawsuit. I can't sit here and tell you that definitively. But if the SEC tells Kentucky he can't play here because he did not enter the portal by April 21st, Mitchell has a very compelling response. Your own eligibility structure gave me no possible reason to enter by April 21st. It's the exact type of rule application courts have been scrutinizing throughout this entire saga. There is a very reasonable argument to make in court again. If the SEC does not want to go ahead and give these players who have been granted a transfer portal window, give them relief underneath this interconference transfer rule, make some sort of exception or change the rule, which in my opinion, again, to go back to what the CBS was reporting, the rule is going to be poked at one way or another here in the next couple of weeks. Fall practice for these kids is going to be starting soon. So if we want to talk about the threat rankings for Mitchell, if we're asking, hey, what's the most dangerous thing right now? First and foremost, I think it's actually the NCAA appeal and potential stay of the Kentucky order. That's the big one because it attacks his 5th season specifically, and then you got a problem. The second one here is the SEC's intraconference transfer rule. It's the biggest Kentucky-specific obstacle if Mitchell wants to transfer from Missouri to Kentucky. And then the third thing here is actually the SEC's new professional player policy, because I'm less worried about this after all of the latest facts. There was no early entry filing, no signed professional contract, according to his agent. The summer league thing is the unresolved question, but again, even that is not specified in the language that the SEC provided in their statement, their ruling. So I do think that this does end one of three ways. In my opinion, the most likely here is that the SEC grants or interprets some sort of exception and Mark Mitchell still plays. The second most likely, in my opinion, is the SEC tries to enforce the transfer rule. Mitchell takes this thing right back to court, and we get another injunction fight, and we're locked on lawsuits here, I guess. And then the biggest danger here is the NCAA successfully gets Edwards' protection stayed before the season. That's the biggest problem. But right now, I'm still betting he plays. And pause for water. People in the comments saying, just drink the water. You don't have to say anything. I don't know how to do that. I am begging to talk about actual college basketball. I want to talk about rosters. I want to talk about rotations. I want to talk about how Mark Pope's starting five is going to perform. I want to talk about whether or not they can actually play defense. I want to talk about whether or not this team can rebound effectively enough as a team to make a legitimate NCAA tournament push. I want to talk about whether or not Alex Wilkins is the weak link in this rotation or if he's the best player here. I want to talk about whether or not Kentucky's turnover rate between their backcourt could end up being a problem. I want to talk about Jerome Morton playing extremely well against quad one competition over the course of his career and statistically being a riser when it comes to playing tough competition. I want to talk about the fact that he shot 57% from three against Tier A opponents and shot 48% from three at Wazoo in conference play. I want to talk about ball, right? Like, can we please, to wrap up the show, can we just talk about basketball, actual basketball for 7 minutes, 7 minutes? While all of these attorneys are out here sending emails, arguing back and forth, Greg Sankey sitting in his little blue and yellow chair up in Birmingham, wiggling his fingers together, laughing maniacally over the fact that he's trying to screw every single athlete out of an opportunity of getting to play while courts are agreeing with these players, while he's sitting there with his little, can't say it. While all this is happening, Mark Pope has added the exact type of player, offensive player, that this team was missing. Guys, what does Mark Mitchell actually change on the court for Kentucky? What does he do? Let's actually talk about it here in a moment. But first, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Odoo. Running a business should not feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. Man, doesn't this feel topical? You get one app for accounting, you get another for inventory, you get another for sales, and somehow none of them actually talk to each other. Man, doesn't this sound topical? That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is a all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. Sales and accounting, inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is the one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. And the best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. As we all know, as we are all witnessing here currently, you cannot win unless your operations are actually effective, communicate well, talk to each other, and are consistent with their chemistry on a day-to-day basis. This goes to the players, this goes to the staff, this goes to the people above the staff, this goes to the SEC, this goes to the NCAA. Great organizations win and are successful and are consistent because their operations matter. That's why you and your business should get Odoo. You can try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. Free today at odoo.com/lockedon. All right, wrapping up today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We are going to talk about some actual freaking basketball. We're going to do it here. If you have missed any of the comments today as to why I believe that Mark Mitchell will become eligible for Kentucky, just start the episode back over. We're live here on YouTube. If you want to get involved on the Locked On Kentucky hotline, 859-359-6362 is the number to dial. Can't take live calls, but if you do call, several of you have, and you have just not left a voicemail, leave a voicemail for the show, 859-359-6362. We will get to the voicemails on later episodes this week. We can get to them tomorrow if you call in now and you give your thoughts. So let's talk about some actual basketball for a few minutes. Right? Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't it be awesome for just no Greg Sankey, no Judge Brian Edwards, no TROs, no Exhibit 10 contracts here, no antitrust law, no portal windows, none of this, just actual basketball. Mark Mitchell, if he does play, and I've already told you I think he does, and we've already kind of talked about this a little bit on the show, but Kentucky just added a really freaking good player. A-plus portal edition, according to Evan Mia. 99th percentile, top 6 player in the transfer portal, according to 24/7 Sports. This wasn't a depth piece. This wasn't just another forward to add that might pop alongside Njai and McBride. This is one of the best players in the SEC. What's actually happening with the team right now? Well, Kentucky's 8-week summer practice period is already over. The Cats held their final workout open practice on August 6th. Mitchell did not participate, obviously, in that summer practice period, but after the Kentucky court ruling in his commitment, Mitchell has been given the go-ahead to enroll in classes, join team activities, prepare for fall practice. The Herald Leader reported that Kentucky's first fall practice is roughly 4-ish weeks away, so he's not practicing yet, but he is now allowed to be involved while the legal practice process, does continue. Again, we're not adding some rando from the mid-majors. This is a kid at Missouri that averaged 18, 5, 3.5, shot 55% from the floor and 39% from three. This is a good player, like a really good player. And a stat that we have not really talked about a ton, actually, we haven't talked about this individual stat specifically, but just a part of his game that we really do need to emphasize here. Stat for you. 266 free throw attempts. 266 free throw attempts for Mark Mitchell last season. That ranked 8th nationally. I gotta get this chair fixed. That ranked 8th nationally. Mitchell became only the second player in Missouri men's basketball history to lead the team in scoring, rebounding, and assists. That tells you exactly what he is. It's not just a spot up four. It's not somebody standing in the corner waiting on Zoom Diallo to manufacture offense for him. This is somebody that can individually on his own create pressure on a defense. Obviously, Kentucky's already got shooting. Milan Momcilovic, you got to find him. Alex Wilkins can shoot. Jerome Morton can shoot. Cam Williams can shoot. Kentucky isn't adding Mitchell because it desperately needs another guy chucking 7 threes a game. They've got that. Kentucky needed somebody. And this is why I like Keyshawn Hall so much, who just committed to St. John's, mind you. Kentucky desperately needed somebody that can say, move, get out of the way. I'm going to the rim, and 266 free throws tells me he does that. Best free throw rate in the SEC. For the Kentucky spacing, Mitchell will be a nightmare. If their shooting is as good as we think it will be, especially with the best shooter in the country, who already provides insane gravity, this will be an offense where Mark Mitchell, while he may not average 18 per game because Kentucky's got a lot of mouths to feed, he is going to be impossible at times to stop because of the spacing, because you're going to get him in one-on-one situations where he barrels to the rim and he draws a foul or he scores. My guess is that his efficiency will take a rise because also, and we'll get to in a second, he is a good playmaker. I do want to touch on the 38% three-point shooting, 39% three-point shooting here for a second, because it does sound awesome on paper, but as we have already discussed, we said this a bunch before he even committed, it was 19 for 49. It's 1.5 attempts per game. Even 24/7 Sports, Travis Branham told the Herald Leader he doesn't expect Mitchell to become a high-volume three-point shooter at Kentucky. You can't sell this kid as a sniper, and previously in his career, like last 2 seasons, he was shooting under 28% from deep. That is just not his game. You sell him in this offense as a downhill 6'9" creator who has become good enough from three that you can't completely ignore him. He's knocking down open shots. That here is much more valuable. And the starting five here feels completely obvious. Coming out of the summer, it was pretty clear. Diallo, Wilkins, Momcilovic, Moreno, who's going to be at the 4. Neither Usman Njai or Justin McBride had completely seized that 5th starting spot. There were reports from KSR and other folks that it was kind of back and forth through the summer, where some days Njai would look good, other days McBride wouldn't. Some days McBride would pop, other days he'd be a shot chucker. Some days Njai would look really good and fit in his role. Other days it was like he almost wasn't there. And now it's kind of like a come on, you got your answer. Mark Mitchell starting at the 4, so it's Diallo, Wilkins, Momcilovic, Mitchell, and Moreno. One of the biggest lineups in the SEC, one of the biggest lineups in the country. And the Mitchell-Milan combination is something that we should just be fired up about heading into the season. Because this is where it kind of gets fun. Milan, he bends your defense horizontally, right? Because of his gravity. You cannot lose him. You have to stay with him. You got to put a body on him. You got to put eyes on him. You cannot help too far off of him. You have to chase him around screens. And Zoom Diallo, I mean, he literally said this summer that if you don't locate Milan Momcilovic at all times, you're taking the ball out of the net. About 2 seconds later. So he bends the defense horizontally. As we just discussed, Mitchell bends the defense vertically. He gets downhill, he gets into your chest, he gets fouled, he creates help. And when the help comes for Mark Mitchell, who again boasted the best free throw rate, 266 of them things last season, best free throw rate in the SEC, when the help does come, he's also got a 20+% assist rate. He's a legitimate passer. You don't just stumble across 3.6 assists per game from your 6'9" power forward. That's not nothing. So you've got gravity on the wing, and you've got somebody who can barrel right through open lanes and draw fouls. If you want to help at your own risk. Imagine those two things put together. You want to help on Mitchell? Milan Momcilovic is waiting for you. You want to stay glued to Milan? Mitchell has room to attack. Just that two-man game is really nasty. And the cool thing about this is it does take pressure off of Zoom. And this is going to be one of the biggest benefits for Kentucky's offense this season, is that before Mitchell, there was a scenario where Kentucky needed Zoom Diallo to immediately arrive and become the creator. Not just the point guard, not just the guy who's saving possessions out here. Obviously, that on itself is a lot to ask. Now, Zoom can run the team. He can push tempo. He can use the Moreno ball screens and feed shooters and feed other players, become a better point guard. If Kentucky gets 6 minutes into a rock fight at Tennessee later in the schedule, and their first few actions don't work, Mark Mitchell is your answer. He can go get you something out of nothing. That's a major difference here. Major difference. He also, we need to point this out, we're just talking ball, he does not erase Kentucky's questions. We can't turn this conversation into Kentucky has no weaknesses. That's what a lot of people would probably sit here if they were listening to me isolated in this conversation. That's probably what they would sit here and tell you. This guy thinks that Kentucky is invincible. Not even close. Take it back to the Herald Leader. What did they report? Coming out of summer, defense was probably the biggest question, with rebounding close behind it. Two things you need to win a championship, 1,000%. Those two things are defense wins championships, rebounding saves you possessions. Those are the two most important things for you. Mitchell really does help defensively because of his size, mobility, and ability to switch. But this notion out here from some of these national pundits that he's a really good defender, I think is inaccurate. Evan Mia rates his court impact to be defensive court impact to be just barely above average. He's not a stocks guy. He does not create steals. He does not create blocks. He's not a consistent secondary rim protector. When you actually watch him, he gets lost in a ton of actions based on the matchup because he's playing often against the opposing team's three. He's not really around the rim a ton to affect things. So while he is athletic, mobile, tall, great wingspan, he's not a great defender, or at least hasn't been utilized in ways that force him to be a great defender at the very least. I don't think he's an elite defender, so I don't think he masks Kentucky's issues there, but he does give them a body that's more athletic and more fluid and more experienced than maybe what you have with Njai or McBride. His camp has talked about how his defense is an underrated part of his game. I want to see it. You also have to point out the rebounding. 5.2 rebounds is at 6'9" is not, like we've mentioned, Jackson Kohler level rebounding. Like, it's not even close. Kentucky still has to learn to rebound as a team. Mark Pope has said as much this offseason. With Mitchell in this lineup, With Mitchell in this lineup, the bench gets really interesting really quick. You've got, let's just run through it here. Cam Williams, Jerome Morton, Mason Williams, Trent Noah, Justin McBride, Usman Njai, Frank Kepnong, Braden Hawthorne. A lot of guys with potential off the bench. Some of those guys are going to hit. One of those guys, I believe, is actually Jerome Morton. Actual summer practice intel, something that Zoom raved about, something that other people reported. Zoom specifically singled out Morton as one of the better defenders in this backcourt, picking up guys 94 feet, called Mason Williams and Justin McBride practice surprises. We are no longer searching, in my opinion, or Pope isn't, for what 8 guys are playable, right? You're not looking for that. You're trying to figure out, okay, which 8 or 9 guys deserve to play the most? You have a 15-man roster. You're not going to play 15 guys. Not going to play 15 guys, even in your non-conference schedule, more often than not. You're not going to play 14. You're not going to play 12. when it gets to SEC play, you're going to play 11 at most, and the 11th guy is going to barely be there. This is going to be a 10.5-man rotation if Kentucky gets their stuff right and everyone's healthy. Knock on wood. Having this problem of figuring out which guys deserve to play, that's a championship roster problem. And again, if Mark Mitchell is eligible, I've said it, Kentucky's got a top 10 roster and Final Four talent. I'm comfortable saying that, and CBS Sports went as far as saying Pope has a roster with valid Final Four hopes if Mitchell is ultimately cleared. Does that mean they should automatically just make a Final Four? No. You still have questions to answer. Is Zoom ready to run an elite team? It's a really good question to ask. Can Kentucky defend consistently? Just because they're tall doesn't mean they can. Can they rebound as a team? Just because they're tall doesn't mean they can. How quickly does Mitchell integrate after missing the summer? Just because he was good before doesn't mean he doesn't have rust to knock off in this system now. Can Mark Pope actually settle on the correct rotation after being willy-nilly over his first couple of seasons, just throwing guys out near platoon style? The talent question is one that you and I should be done asking. They've clearly got the talent, but there are other questions around that. Kentucky doesn't need every projection to hit. They don't need to sit here and say, well, maybe Zoom becomes a star, maybe Wilkins translates, maybe Cam takes a leak, maybe Milan stays as consistent as he was at Iowa State, maybe somebody at the 4 breaks out. You have an 18-point per game all-SEC player to throw into this roster. We've already talked about this. Everybody gets to slide one chair closer, in my opinion, to the role that they're naturally suited for. The commitment here is huge. And then we'll end the show on this. We'll mark it down. I wish I had the button still. You can mark it down. Mark Mitchell will play basketball for Kentucky this season. That's my call today. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's not risk. The NCAA appeal is real. The SEC intraconference transfer stuff is real. The Summer League language does deserve clarification, but the more we learn about Mitchell's actual professional status, which doesn't really seem to be there is one, the stronger his position looks. He did not file, obviously. His agent says he never signed a contract. Kentucky currently has a court order protecting his 5th season. If the SEC wants to come out here and try and tell him he missed a transfer window that closed while the NCAA itself considered him out of eligibility, final bit of my notes here, I think they're going to have another lawsuit on their hands. I really do. And if the lawyers get out of the way, Kentucky's starting 5 is going to be way more interesting here for us to actually talk about on the show than any sort of stupid court docket or any sort of judge ruling or what the NCAA or what stupid Greg Sankey has to say about literally anything. So that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can follow the show on YouTube. Obviously, subscribe, please. You can follow me on Twitter at LockedOnUK. Follow me on Twitter also at LanceDaw_. And over on Instagram at Kentucky Podcast and LanceDaw_. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.